Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Don't Police podcast. Today we'll be discussing nature versus nurture. Which one is the driving factor for temperament? In order to answer this question, we will be looking at the environment and genetics and see what impact, if any, they each have on temperament and behavior. That said, get your favorite drink and snack, relax, and let's get into it. The most obvious example of environmental influences in animal behavior is, well, us. Humans are innately flexible in behavior and we mimic a lot. What I mean by that is we see something that works and we copy it. This is an example of what I call adaptive behavior. We change as the environment changes, and it is easy for us to change based on our needs. So what? Are we just anthropomorphizing animals, or is there more to adaptive behavior than humans? By the way, excuse me if I keep clearing my throat. I'm got something going on over here. The important thing about adaptive behavior in this discussion is that there is a clear example of environment determining behavioral outcomes in an animal. There's definitely more than meets the eye. Animals like lions and wolves will change hunting tactics to some degree depending on the prey animal. Cephalopods like squid and octopods can change their behavior to solve problems, and rats can do that as well. And yes, dear listeners, octopods is the correct plural for octopus, followed by the less correct octopuses, and finally the least correct Latin bastardization of the Greek word octopi. Do with that knowledge what you will. We can even see adaptive behavior in puppies, though, and getting back to the topic. If the puppy pees in the house, depending on your discipline method, the dog will stop peeing in the house. That's an example of the environment influencing behavior. We can limit or enhance certain behaviors with proper training. That's pretty common knowledge, otherwise we wouldn't have dog trainers. Well, so that's it, right? Training changes behavior, case closed. Not so fast. To fully understand this argument, we have to address the genetic side of the argument and see how much impact, if any, it has on temperament. A good place to start on genetics is seeing if there's any innate behavior in animals, and there is. An elk mother, for example, will give birth to her calf in tall or heavy brush. The calf is born nearly scentless, and the mother has a scent, so the mother will leave the calf alone so that her scent doesn't draw predators to the calf. But this entire time that the calf is gone, or that the mother is gone, the calf will hold almost perfectly still, and it knows to do this without the mother ever teaching it. Newborn zebras, on the other hand, can walk and run within an hour of being born, and will flee predators if they feel scared. Newborn mammals will instinctively seek and suckle their mother's teat. Human twins, for example, will behave quite differently when raised together and under social pressure to stand out. But when they're raised separately, the more separately they're raised, the more similar they behave to one another, because they don't have that incentive to develop away from each other. Newly hatched alligators will start crying for their mothers. Another example is I raise rabbits, and if you take male rabbits, even if they've never been mentored or seen another male rabbit in their lives, they've only spent time with their mother, they will instinctively fight other males and try to mount females when they reach sexual maturity, even though they've never been taught or seen it. And even with dogs, we see a wide variety of breed-specific behaviors. Malinois puppies, for example, will bite and latch onto anything they can, and heelers will try to herd things. Many protection breeds are alert as puppies and will bark or otherwise react when they see something they are suspicious of. And every Chihuahua that I've ever met was incredibly aggressive. Sometimes it seems to be a fear aggression, and usually, though, I think it's just a territorial thing. Like, Chihuahuas are naturally protective animals. because we rarely see Chihuahuas acting aggressively towards their owners, but almost always aggressively towards everybody else. So since we see aggressive behavior in nearly all Chihuahuas, and nearly all Chihuahuas are raised differently from one another, then we can safely assume that genetics is a component in this example. And just a side note, I often see people ask, when they're having this argument, explain Chihuahuas in the aggression debate, and it's the people who say that temperament is environmental. But, I mean, since when does size determine an animal can't be aggressive? I think it has to do with this human obsession with size being some great contributor to power, and we thusly equate power to aggression. But if we look at honey badgers and hippos, for example, one is larger and one is smaller than a lion, yet both are more aggressive than lions. So we can easily see examples in nature that size doesn't correlate to aggression at all. Aggression is entirely separate and unique from size. So when we see behaviors across such a wide variety of species being expressed at such an early age that it couldn't possibly have been learned from hands-on experience, and it's too early in the animal's development to have likely been learned from observational learning, like our elk, for example, we can conclude that there is some innate cause for these behaviors. So clearly it's genetics, right? Well, not necessarily. I know what you guys are thinking. Well, you said it wasn't environment, and you said it's not genetics, so what is it? It's a lot more complicated than that. To get to the real answer, we have to trace the cause of behavior to the brain. Not just to the brain, but to the neurons and how they're wired, the regions of the brain and how those are wired, which parts of the brain are more active, when and why, and then what hormones come into play and how they're scaled in response to stimuli. Genetics determine the wiring of the brain and the scaling of the hormonal responses to stimuli, but a lot of studies have shown that environment can also have an impact on how the brain decides that it should be wired. And I'll be posting links in the comment section for you guys, so you guys can go do your own research on the issue. And hopefully, after doing your own research, which is why I'm putting the links there to encourage you to go out and find your own answers. My goal is to show you that you should agree with me, not because you should agree with me, but because I've done the research and I am 100% confident in my knowledge on the matter. Another part of the problem that comes to mind that brings this discussion into such hot debate is that there's a wide variety of types of aggression, right? There's fear aggression, food aggression, same-sex aggression, leash aggression, crate aggression, dog aggression, human aggression, just to name a few. And depending on the aggression, it may have a different source. We could expect that since same-sex aggression is very common, there's a ubiquitous genetic factor for same-sex aggression. But canines didn't evolve with any natural sort of confinement. So we could likewise conclude that leash aggression is probably environmental, bad training methods and so forth. And but when we say aggression, most people, all those aggressions that I just named, most people take them and just throw them under one title. And so when you do that, you're treating all aggressions as the same thing, right? It's like treating every color like it's the same color, but they're all different colors, and each color takes different things to make that color, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know. I'll try to figure out a better analogy for that. Another major argument I often hear is, if such and such breed is aggressive, then why are there aggressive dogs in other breeds? Well, by denying genetics, we're setting ourselves up to not understand this question. So if we take a step back, the answer is just a simple matter of evolution. Let's say the entire world only has 100 Labrador retrievers, and I might find that, like in most breeds, maybe, this is just an example, I don't know the real numbers, but maybe 5% of our Labrador Retriever population, like all the other breeds, is naturally dog aggressive. So that means we've got 5 dogs out of 100 that are dog aggressive. Now let's say I wanted to breed dog aggressive dogs. So what I would do is I would seek out these 5 dogs, find out who owns them or whatever, and breed just from them. And then, in theory, and depending on your time in history and the region you're living in, my friends and my peers would all want some of the dogs that I have because they see what I have and they want what I have. So over time, from these 5 dogs, we're breeding more and more dogs, and the human selecting pressure on the breed is favoring dog aggressive individuals. So we get 2 results from this. One is that the entire Labrador Retriever population can trace its ancestry back to these 5 dogs, and 2, the majority of the breed will have a temperament that reflects this ancestry and these breeding choices. And so that's why you can have one breed that is almost uniformly, say, dog aggressive, but then you have a dozen other breeds that are not dog aggressive, but maybe one of those other breeds is prey driven and maybe another of those breeds is very protective. But it's very rare to find all of those personality traits in the same breed. It's extremely rare. In fact, I'm not even sure it's possible. I can't think of one dog breed that's both dog aggressive, human aggressive, and has prey drive. So at the very basic level of this discussion, we see that genetics are responsible for the structure of the brain, the scaling of the hormones, and other things that influence behavior. But genetics can't be the only factor, as we've already seen that training can alter behavior. Environment can also have a secondary influence on behavior by altering brain development. This is most evident in embryonic development, for example, like malnutrition or overnutrition and overrepresentation of certain nutrients, or exposure to certain chemicals. We see this a lot in humans. Exposure to nicotine or alcohol can really change the behavior of an infant before they're even born, and they can have life-altering consequences because of that. And there's no reason to think why that would not be the case for dogs, just because they're dogs, right? And we'll get into that a little bit here in a minute. As we can see, the causes of development and temperament are quite a bit more complicated than what most people give it credit for. So where does it leave us in this discussion? The short answer, I would say, is that genetics builds the car, right? And the long answer would be that genetics builds the car, drives the car, determines the car performance, and environment, or more appropriately for this this analogy, is that weather alternates the road conditions, which forces the car to behave differently. And it really, in my research, I found that a really good summarization of what I'm trying to say here is there's this Canadian psychologist, his name is Donald Hebb, and he says that the nature-nurture controversy is similar to an argument about whether the area of a rectangle depends more importantly on the width or the length. And so what he means essentially is that width and length are both equally important in how a rectangle develops. Now, I don't think that's 100% congruent to what I'm trying to show here about temperament, but it's a really good analogy because genetics and environment are both extremely important, and in a lot of ways, people don't even think about it like this, but environment can determine the behavioral differences of an animal for one generation, but those behavioral differences can have consequences on which mates, if any, that individual has access to. And so just by one little thing in the environment changing, the behavioral differences that come of that environmental difference can lead to an entire evolutionary shift, and so that the environment can change behavior, which can change the genetic composition of a population. If that makes sense. And if I'm not making sense, let me know in the comments. And I'll try to speak more eloquently. But that leaves us with another question. Why, if temperament is so clearly has a major genetic component, why do so many people refuse to believe it? Is half the population uneducated or inherently scientifically illiterate? No, I don't think so. In fact, I have a theory to explain this phenomena. People are problem solvers, right? So we find the quickest way to solve a problem. And if a dog breed is causing a problem, the shortest solution is to ban the breed. So when the question of aggression being genetic comes up, people who love dogs understand that the writing is on the wall. Their breed is either on the chopping block, or it may end up on the chopping block if other breeds start getting banned. Because, problems are highly subjective issues, and so, this other breed got banned, and, maybe it's not going to impact them directly, but then other people are like, oh, well, this other breed is causing problems, so let's get it banned too. And the next thing you know, your breed is getting banned. So when people think about this issue, they take it personally and they think that their breed is always going to be under threat. And for a lot of people, that's a legitimate concern. So I think that a lot of people do understand that it's genetic, but they're rejecting this fact publicly. So even though they may fully comprehend the genetic factor, they reject it in hopes that their breed won't get banned. So basically, it's like being willfully ignorant, like, oh, I didn't know that was illegal, so therefore I'm innocent. Or you can superimpose that onto the dog argument, and you're like, well, it's not this, so you shouldn't ban the dogs. Excuse me. But I mean, obviously that's not working, right? Like a lot of cities and counties within the United States, entire provinces in Canada, and even entire countries like the UK and Australia have banned breeds despite people being willfully ignorant about the causes of temperament. And to me, this means that we need to find a new solution to banning dogs. And ignorance obviously isn't going to work. It's not the answer. The best solution to me is to hold owners responsible for their dogs. And I know it almost sounds like I'm saying the same things that the non-genetic believers are saying, but hear me out. If we acknowledge as a society that genetics is a factor, and that I lost my train of thought. If we as a society acknowledge that genetics is a factor, and we acknowledge, and this is huge, right, that not every dog is for every person, then we set the stage for two things. For one, holding owners accountable for their dogs and their dogs' actions, and two, for people comprehending openly and without the risk of social ostracization that this dog is not going to behave the same as a Labrador. It's not going to behave the same as a Golden Retriever. This dog right here has a history of this or this, and so obviously it's going to be best suited for a home that maybe has only one dog, or that only has one person. For example, a Fila Brasileiro is a dog that gets along best with a single person household because they have a reputation for just destroying everything, and not inanimate objects, it's animate objects. I've heard, I haven't been able to corroborate this with research, but I've heard that it's fear aggression. So essentially they just see every living thing as a threat other than their owner, and so they attack it. And that's, if you're going to get a dog like that, you need to understand that this Fila is not going to be a good service dog if I'm going to be out in public, or this Fila isn't going to be a nanny dog. Not that that's the stereotype that that dog has ever had, but you need to understand that not every dog is going to behave the same way. And so that's what I mean when I say hold owners accountable. I guess what I'm saying is hold owners accountable for their breed's history and what should be expected of that dog because of the history. So, and anticipate is basically what I'm saying. Another issue is a big cultural one. People treat the word aggression like it's synonymous with evil, but that isn't the case. If a man aggressively pursues his career, or if a football player is playing aggressively, then they're said to be successful, not menaces. So maybe when a dog is aggressive, that's not a bad thing. Maybe instead of calling aggression bad, we should look at it like this. It's not for everybody. If you want a dog that's got a really soft temperament, then just research your dogs and find one that's going to be easier to train, that's going to be great with kids, it's going to be very patient, and maybe you don't want a dog that's going to be, high prey drive or something like that, especially if you're going to have other small animals in the house. These are all things that you need to consider, and getting a dog isn't what it used to be when the market was only a handful of breeds and they were all pretty much the same, or when every dog was going to a working home where, if you're a farmer, then obviously you're going to be looking at 2 or 3 different types of breeds. That's going to be your livestock guardian breeds, your herding breeds, and maybe a hunting breed or a retriever. But now that we have this market where people can access nearly any of the 400 plus existing breeds, you have to be a lot more careful in what you're getting and why you're getting it. And you have to take a lot of accountability into your choices there. I think another big problem is that people just don't like dog fighting. And now, stay with me, I'm going somewhere with this. So to them, the idea that the dog would have an innate enjoyment or an innate or genetic urge to want to fight can be a bit unnerving. It's a fairly alien concept. If you don't like fighting, then why would anybody else like it? It's like the pineapple on pizza argument is a really good example. You don't like pineapple on your pizza, so what do? You share the meme that says everybody like that deserves to go to the gulag. Because it's not relatable, right? But just because it's not relatable or just because you don't like it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And so I think a lot of people impose our feelings about fighting onto the animal, and then we accuse their owners of forcing them to fight. But let me tell you, I've been a dog owner for many years, and if my dogs don't want to do something, they're not going to do it. I'm the owner, I'm the master, I'm in charge, but I can't make them take their medicine without forcing them to swallow it, right? And likewise, I can't force them to not want to watch me to poop. So if a dog doesn't want to fight, then it's not going to, unless it feels threatened. But then at the same time, you get into this other argument, are you forcing it to? But at the same time, if you acknowledge that these dogs were bred to want to fight, then you'll understand that neither one of them was forced into it. They were selected for that trait, and then you bring them together, and that instinct becomes active, that instinct to engage the opponent. And that's the way you should be, at least exploring looking at the issue like this, because it can really change your perspective and help you understand why things are the way they are. And I think, well, not what I think, but really what we need to do is we need to ask ourselves when we look at something, and this isn't just for dogs, this is for anything, politics, science, whatever. When you develop an idea about the world, we need to ask, is this the way it really is, or is this the way I really want it to be? So basically just ask yourself, am I seeing it for what it is, or am I seeing it for what I think it should be? Now, before we finish up, I'm almost done. I'll just have one final thought. And so no matter how things work with temperament, it always boils down to genetics, because even if it were environment, genetics tell different animals to behave under different how to behave under different stress. So a bad environment might make one dog or person cower in fear, but that same environment might turn another dog or person into a warrior. So if it were entirely environmental, then every animal would react to the environment identically to each other. So I hope all that made sense. This is a new podcast. Did you guys love it? Do you hate it? Do you think I can improve? I guarantee I can. Just tell me what you think. Did I miss anything? Please tell me how you feel in the comments. And if you want to hear more informative dog and other animal related podcasts each week, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll put links to resources below so you can conduct your own research, just like I mentioned earlier. And I love discussion. Discussion is great. It's a great way to vent. It's a great way to learn about other people, to learn about different subjects, and to get different perspectives on things. So I definitely encourage discussion in the comments. And if you guys want to engage me directly, then feel free to comment, and I'll try to get back to you as much as possible. And I know you guys love to debate, so feel free to take these resources that I'm sharing and use them as links in your debates when you're trying to help educate or at least show other people different perspectives in the future. And that being said, don't forget to share with your friends. And I really appreciate your time. Thanks for watching, and have a great evening.